so that evening when I got to my hotel, I pulled out the only piece of technology I had at the time, which was my Windows 1998 computer. And I sat down and I wrote out a statement to God, promise. And I promised that I was going to give God an open book with my life. I said, I'm going to leave the pages white. You can write my story for me. You're going to do a lot better job of it than I'll ever will. And ran down to my grandfather's hotel room that evening, and he was excited, and he was always one of the biggest encouragements to me in my ministry. And no, he was very proud of that. And so from then on, I was your typical teenager, and a lot of questions teenagers ask is always why, or where are we going, or what's next. And I had that same conversation a lot with God in my prayer life, was I want to know, I've got a blank page, but I'd love to know what you're going to write in it. And so I'd keep asking God over and over again, what's the answer? Where do you want me to go? Can you at least give me a hint? And we went to another conference the following year at Marion Avenue Baptist Church, which used to be pastored by Pastor Larry Brown. And they were having a youth conference. And they had a guest speaker from Tanzania, East Africa, who was a missionary. And that man's name was Jerry Wyatt III. And I don't remember what he preached on that evening. I know it was about his field. But the only words that kept coming into my heart and my mind was, there's the answer. And I felt God moving in my heart that that's the answer I've been waiting to show you right there, is I want you to serve in Tanzania, East Africa. And so right after the service, the very first time I'd ever met Pastor Wyatt, I went up to him, and my introduction was, hello, sir, I think God wants me to spend the rest of my life working with you. And that was my introduction to him. And from that point forward, I knew I needed to be prepared the best I could to be a missionary. So I looked at some Bible colleges and decided which one had, in my opinion, the best missions program. So I went to Hyles-Anderson College in 2013. And God had a lot in store for me there. And one of the opportunities I had was to visit Tanzania for an entire summer and work in the church that God is going to have me visit in. And at this time, we did a video while we were in Tanzania. So if we can go ahead and show that at this time, I think we'll go ahead and get that for this evening. The video will kind of give just a little bit of a visual as far as what the culture is like. And tonight I'd like to kind of give you a little bit of a view into the culture that God has called me to reach. And let's see here if we can get that ready. We connected to the video on that? And searching. Source detected. See if we can find it here. Nothing? See if we can get this figured out here real quick. Just be one moment. If you try plugging the HDMI in and plugging out just from the cord, see if we can get... Okay, if we just hit the skip button that goes back to the beginning real quick, we'll just start from there real quick. Awesome, thank you. All righty. Pastor, if you would go ahead and just do a four-fingered swipe either left or right, and we'll get started with the rest of this evening. That's all righty. Awesome. Let me see if we can find it here, and we'll get started. Don't you love technology? Awesome. All righty. We'll get started here this evening. So I mentioned before the video a little bit that I got to spend a summer in Tanzania. God opened the door for me to come visit for about 3 months, a little over 3 months, and help out in a lot of the ministries. And as a young college student, that was very encouraging. I've been going through all this work and studies to get where God has me to go, and here I get kind of a little sneak peek and a little bit of a jump start on it, and to get to see and be there. And I mentioned earlier that Pastor Wyatt had sent me on several different projects and activities while I was there, and one of the men that it was on staff at the church that he kind of teamed me up with was this, if I can get to it here. This is Tito. Tito is Swahili. Swahili is the language they speak in Tanzania, is Swahili for Titus. And I'm not completely fluent in Swahili yet. I haven't had the time. There's a language school about 10 minutes from the church that my wife and I will be living on campus and attending for the first few months of our time in Tanzania. But Tito speaks very good English, and so Pastor Wyatt kind of teamed us together to kind of work, and he kind of helped me out. Tito, one of his jobs is he's in charge of the Calvary's Love Children's Home. The church has an orphanage about a block and a half from the church, and they currently have 6 boys there, all 6 of which are completely surrendered to full-time Christian service and are very active in the church, and we're very excited to see what God is going to use these young men for. It's always encouraging to see someone come as a young person and grow up in the church and to get grounded in it, and that's very exciting to see what's going to be on the future. Another ministry that's very a little bit different than we might have here in the U.S. is the public school ministry. The public schools actually welcome us to come right on in and teach a Bible class. And it's not required for students to come, but it's voluntary. So everyone that's in these pictures has come on a volunteer basis to come to Bible class on some extra school time. I don't know many kids that want to spend more time in school. Usually they're waiting to get out. But these young people come and want to hear what the Bible has to say. And on this particular day, when I took these pictures, we actually had about 13 of them raise their hands to trust Christ as Savior during that. So that's something that may be a little bit foreign now in America, as we're seeing that kind of the absence of God in the public schools. But in Tanzania, God has opened that door wide open for us to come and preach that loud and clear. Another ministry we're in is the Bible Club ministry. And for those of you who may not know, Bible Clubs, what we do is we take the church van, and we load it up with some John and Romans and some supplies, and we drive to a couple nearby neighborhoods, and we'll just honk on the horn a couple of times, and the kids are pretty well trained in the fact they know that means it's time for Bible Club, and so they'll invite their friends, and they'll come out of the woodwork to hear what's going to be preached that evening. And so Tito and myself usually actually did a couple of lessons, and usually it centers around just a Bible lesson and some games and some treats for the kids, and a lot of times that's some of the only interaction a lot of these kids have with a church or the Bible is the Bible Club ministry. And I love working with youth. I mentioned the church has an orphanage, but there are more orphans in Morogoro than we can reach or house currently. So we do what's called Orphan Outreach. Orphan Outreach is every Friday evening. We serve a meal for any kids that want to come. And a lot of them, it's one of their only chances to get free food like that without begging or trying to steal it. And so they'll come. We provide a free meal, and we also play some games. They love soccer. I've been schooled a couple of times by kids half my size, which is a little embarrassing. But they love soccer, and then afterwards we'll do a Bible lesson down at the Sunday school room. So these are all kids that would have come for that. That grew, and this is the teen camp that I mentioned. This is actually one of 2 teen camps. I did one when I lived there for the summer, and also another one when my wife and I went over for a month for our honeymoon. So we did another one there. This is some of the teenagers that were involved in that, very faithful people. A huge part of Faith Baptist Church, which is the name of the church in Morogoro, is soul winning. We have 2 or 3 different opportunities throughout the week for different people that may not be able to make it every day to come out and go soul winning. And it's a vibrant part of the core part of the church is witnessing to people. And when we go out, we don't often pass out tracts. We actually do John and Romans. And church has generously donated a whole shipping container full of John and Romans with the gospel printed on the back. So when someone reads that, if they want to learn more or if they may not be able to make it to church, they've at least got a copy of some of God's Word in their hand that they can continue reading and learning more and getting grounded in it. Before I show this clip here real quick, just 1 or 2 really personal soul winning stories to me that we were out. A big part of transportation in Morogoro is motorcycle taxi. And I'm okay with that. I actually like motorcycles. I learned to ride after visiting for the summer. I've realized, God's probably going to have me drive a motorcycle someday. I ought to learn. And motorcycle taxi is very common. And The thing about motorcycle taxi is wonderful is anybody that's driving by you on a motorcycle on the street is pretty rentable as a taxi. So if you hold out money, they're going to stop and take you anywhere in the city you want to go. So it's very easy to get around. And on this particular Saturday, Pastor Wyatt and I were out visiting in a neighborhood, and there was a guy parked on the corner that his job was a motorcycle taxi. And you got to understand, this is how he provides for his family, is by driving that. So any moment that he's not taking someone somewhere, he's not making money. And so this guy actually took time out of his schedule and his day to stop and listen to what this pastor and I had to say. And very open to the gospel, and he ended up getting saved. And you got to remember, every moment that he's not driving that bike is money he's losing. And so he understood the importance of what he'd just been told. And he looked at Pastor White and he said, my family lives a few blocks away from here. Hop on the back of the bike. We got to go tell them what you just told me. And so we went, got on the bike, motorcycle. 3 or 4 people on a motorcycle is not too uncommon. But we drove a couple blocks away and visited his family, and this entire family was sweetly saved and came to church the following Sunday. So that was just a really exciting story to me. And every Sunday they do have bus routes. They're more of a van route. What this here is actually called is a Dala Dala. And they run them as kind of like city buses up and down the main road. And the church rents 2 or 3 of them every Sunday to go out, bring people in to come to church. And I'll go ahead and hit play real quick. Tanzanians are very stackable in the sense that when you're not too strict on your traffic laws, you can fit a bunch of people in a little 11, 12-passenger van. And no, this is not fake footage. They're not climbing around and coming back on the other side. These are all people that somehow fit in there. And I'm very sure as soon as they were, all took a nice deep breath as soon as they got the door open and they were able to get out. But that van will turn right back around and go out and pick up just as many people to come back to church that following for that service. So church service starts at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning. And I have been crammed in one of those. It's one of the reasons I think God made me so small, is I'm able to fit in those on occasion. And that was just a big part of it. I'll go on to 1 or 2 other points real quick before we go back to some soul winning. The gentleman in the middle here, his name is Philemon. And Philemon was a member of Faith Baptist Church growing up, and God called him to go start a church in his home village about an 8-hour train ride away. And so he left, and Pastor White encouraged him to go start one. And so he left and started getting the building ready. And when they were ready to have their first service, before then he came back, and this so happened to be while I was there for the summer, and he bunked with me at my house, and he was ordained at the church during that summer. And so church planting is a big goal of Faith Baptist Church, is we want to see Tanzanians get saved, grow up in church, and then for God to call them to go start a church somewhere else that we may not even be able to go. And it's that multiplication of churches that's going to be the key to reaching Tanzania and ultimately Africa and the world for Christ, is multiplying churches and churches and churches. And real quick, this is another really important soul winning story to me. Like I said earlier, I'm not fluent in Swahili. And it was a little discouraging to me being a college student at Hyles-Anderson, growing up and witnessing to people in Chicago every weekend. And now here I am in Tanzania, and I don't speak Swahili. And I was a little bit discouraged, and I said, God, will you send me somebody I can witness to? And God brought Nick to church one Sunday while I was there. And Nick is on my right, and his little brother's on my left. And I found out really quickly that Nick spoke pretty good English. And God opened the door for me to sit down and say, can I show you something? And I was able to lead my first Tanzanian to Christ. And so that was a really important part of my summer and a real encouragement to me. And Nick still comes to church. I actually talked to Pastor White not too long ago. He's still there. He's still growing. He still comes every Sunday with his little brother. They're very faithful. And that was kind of an exciting point to me. I mentioned in the video that there's a radio station waiting for its frequency to prove. And when we had done the video, that was the case. And now that frequency has been approved after a lot of hassle with the government. We have that open. We're starting our recording, getting ready to start broadcasting equipment. And that's going to be a large listening audience of people we may not even see until we get to heaven and realize that they were witnessed through the radio waves. And the company is an amazing number to me, is the company that helps. They have a ministry helping missionaries in foreign churches get radio towers and do broadcasting work. They're called CRI, Christian Radio International. And as of today, as of right now, their potential listening audience is 2 billion people. 2 billion people in the world that can hear a clear presentation of the gospel if they'll just turn on their radio and listen. And that's exciting to know. So often in the U.S. we get a little bit discouraged, think we don't have a chance at winning the world. But when you really step outside and realize we're winning out there. There's a lot of countries and churches are growing, people are getting saved, and God is still working. God is very much alive in the world, even if we don't realize it. I mentioned in the video the Tanzanian Stadium Crusade. And for those of you who may know what that is, or those of you who may not, there is a soccer stadium in Morogoro, Tanzania. Soccer is a big sport. It's kind of like contrasting, basketball or football in here in America. It's a big deal to them. And there's a soccer stadium called Jamhuri Stadium in downtown Morogoro. And for the longest time, Pastor White had the dream, I want to fill that stadium with people to hear the gospel. And he kept working and praying about it and seeing what doors God would open. And the summer I was there, we launched the very first Tanzanian Stadium Crusade. And what that entails is the church pays for 2 professional soccer teams to come in. This would kind of be like Good News Baptist Church playing for the Bulls and the Lakers to come do a game for y'all. And so it's 2 professional teams will come in, and the church will do the halftime show. And the church doing the halftime show is the preaching of the gospel to an entire stadium of Tanzanians. And my first summer there was the very first time we were able to do that, and God has continued to grow that ministry. We saw, in my first summer, we saw over 500 people saved on one day just from that event alone. And in my first summer while I was in Tanzania, we saw over 1,000 people saved, and that was very, very exciting to me as a young man growing up. Everybody that comes to the stadium gets a John Romans. If you want to see one of those, I have one over on the table. You can try and decipher some Swahili for yourself if you'd like, but everyone that came through that door got a John and Romans with the gospel on the back and got a clear presentation of that. The main event, like I said, of course, is the preaching of the gospel at the halftime show. And most people during the halftime show in the NFL or the NBA, they get up and they go to the bathroom and they go and get snacks, but it's amazing every year that we've done this, God just brings a hush over the stadium and people sit, and they don't get up, they don't leave, and they focus on what's being preached at them. And it's amazing, you can watch in their eyes and realize these people are serious about it. This is something they're really going to sit and listen to. And my dad and I did the media for that. Pastor Wyatt wanted to show people back in America what was being done. And my dad and I are both very good with photography, and we got really good during that summer with video because we didn't have any other choice. But we were the media crew for that, and we knew we couldn't do everything ourselves, so we hired a Tanzanian 2-person crew from Dar es Salaam, which is a big coastal city about 4 hours away, to come and help us with the media. And this gentleman's name right here on the left is Alpha. And Alpha was one of the 2 people that came for the media crew. His boss came with him. And he worked very closely with me and my dad. And we got some great video from the Stadium Crusade that year. And afterwards, they wanted to edit the whole video and get all that cut and ready to go like the following week. So my dad and Alpha shared a hotel room together with a computer working on getting the video together. And part of Alpha's job for the editing was the editing of the video presentation of the gospel. And so Alpha did not get saved at their Stadium Crusade, but as God kept playing that footage over and over and over again in the hotel room, God used that as an open door for my dad to witness to Alpha. And Alpha and his boss both got saved, and Alpha's continued to grow in the Lord. Alpha is actually the one that did the video for me and my wife while we were in Tanzania that we just watched. And so he and his wife are very good friends with me and my family, and it's always encouraging. Every time we go over, we always got to say hi to Alpha, and he usually tags along with us to do that. And Alpha has also done the video work and a lot of the pictures for every Stadium Crusade and a lot of the events at Faith Baptist Church, even though he lives about 4 hours away. So that's kind of an amazing person. All these little stories of people that get saved, and everyone has an individual story, and each of us has an individual relationship with God. Every one of them is special, and every one of them is unique in its own way. And real quick, tonight, I would like to show you the most recent as far as how God has grown that ministry. Pastor, if we could just do a real quick swipe to that other screen, real quick for tonight, if we can do that, just tap on that. If you'll go to the Crusade Take 2, and then in the top right corner. And this is this year's footage. right, Pastor. Thank you very much for showing that. If you go back to that last other side for one more time this evening, I promise that's the last time I'll make you have to work through my equipment. So let me go through real quick and we'll get back on track here. But it's amazing to see God continue to grow that ministry as a tool that we're able to use to witness to people. And it's amazing as we'll go out soul winning the following week, we'll run into people that say, I was at that. You're the church that did that. And it'll open a door for us to be able to talk to them. And every single one of those people that says they got saved, they were the ones that filled out a decision card and left a phone number. And every phone number that we got from those decision cards, every one of those people got a call from members of Faith Baptist Church following up and trying to get them into church. And it's amazing to see God continue to grow Faith Baptist Church through that. So real quickly here, I just want to go on. If you notice the door up on the stage during the most recent year, that was an idea my grandfather had when we started Gospel Light. Was he wanted to teach people how to go soul winning and how to knock on doors. And he had a carpenter in our church built him a door with a platform that he could use from the pulpit to teach people about soul winning. And my dad remembered that when he was over there this last year for the most recent crusade and said, you know what, that'd be a great example to use for the Stadium Crusade this year. So they looked for a Tanzanian carpenter to make a door. And after he made the product, they invited him to come to the Stadium Crusade. And he showed up at the crusade, and it made a lot of sense to him when he saw the door that he had made being used on the platform as the door that was an illustration of God knocking on his heart. And that man ended up getting saved and coming to the church the following Sunday. And so it's just kind of another unique story of the person that made the door that was on the stage. God used that as a tool to witness to that person in maybe a way that he may not have otherwise come or listened. And God does that with a lot of people. God opens a lot of unique doors that someone may not get reached by any other way. And there's people that you and I can witness to that may not listen to someone else, and it's our job to witness to them. And again, with that key verse in the book of Revelation 3:20, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man hear my voice and open the door, it doesn't say I might, it doesn't say I'll think about it. It says I will come into him, and he will sup with me, and with him, and he with me. And that's just a really powerful verse. Ultimately, you've seen just about everything I'm going to show you tonight as far as Africa is concerned. And I could talk for a lot longer about a lot of the different ministries, but there's one core thought that comes through all these different things. This is all about God. You know, I can talk about orphan outreach, but that's just a tool we use to get people to God. You know, you can talk about having a nice church piano and singing songs and having a nice building for people to come, but those are all just tools that we use to bring people to God, and that's the main focus. And tonight, my challenge I want to talk about is just keeping the focus on God. You know, I want to talk tonight from the book of Luke, chapter 12, verses 16 through 21. If we could just turn there briefly real quick, we'll get started with just a quick challenge from God's Word this evening. Let's see here real quick. Luke chapter 12. Luke chapter 12, verses 16 through 21. I'll get started. If you follow along as I read, I'll go ahead. If someone doesn't have their Bible this evening, I'll have that up on the screen for you as well. Luke chapter 12, verse 16. It's one of the more common parables in the New Testament. Jesus is saying, here it is, and he says, and he spake a parable unto them, saying, the ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully. And he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do, because I have no room where to bestow my fruits? And he said, this will I do. I will pull down my barns and build greater. And there will I bestow all my fruits and my goods. And I will say unto my soul, soul, thou hast much goods laid up for many years. Take thine ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God saith unto him, thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided? So is he that layeth up treasures for himself and is not rich towards God. And real quick, before we get started this evening, I'd just like to ask for a word of prayer real quick before I get started this evening. Heavenly Father, I pray that you'd fill me with your Spirit this evening, Lord, and help me to say the words that you'd have only me to say, Lord. I pray that you'd help me to be encouragement to the people here this evening, Lord. May you work in their hearts and mine as well. In your name, amen. We can go real quick. That's the passage we just talked to. And kind of the concept I want to talk tonight is we get so busy, but we do always make times for what's most important to us. And so I want to talk, anybody remember those Tootsie Roll Pops? What do they have at the middle of them? Anybody remember? Tootsie Roll, right. And as a kid, you always either try to get to the center as fast as you can. One of the most common things you ask is, how many licks does it take to get to the center? As a kid, you'd try and bite into it and almost break your teeth trying to do it because you wanted to get to that Tootsie Roll. Because at the center, that was what's important to you, like a little kid at that time. And our life's kind of like that. What's at the center of our life is usually what's most important to us. And tonight, I want to just talk about what's at your center. And so often here, another common verse in the book of Matthew, chapter 6, verse 21, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And it's an interesting wording that God gives that verse. It doesn't say, for where your heart is, there will your treasure be also. It says, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. If you invest in something, if I was to go and invest in some stocks or something, I would probably be picking up the newspaper to look at the stock market because I'd invested something in that. When you invest your time or your money or something that's important to you into something, you immediately are concerned more with that than just about anything else is what you're important with. If you start investing in, let's say, you invest in all this, not probably the best subject, but all the NFL memorabilia, and you've got your favorite team picked out, you've got your cap and your jersey on, you've got a lot invested in them, and you'll faithfully watch that team anytime they're playing just about, or you'll at least check the score because it's important to you. Let me talk about just a couple other things that are sometimes at our center. We mentioned sports. I talk about hobbies. Some people I know it's just fishing, and there's nothing wrong with it, but when it's the center, when that's all you can think about is, it's Sunday morning, do I go to church or do I go fishing? And what's really more important is, I got to go fishing. Man, I might catch the one that I can tell stories about for years after that. Or some people, it's social media. That gets into our minds where the first thing we pick up when we get out of bed in the morning is our phone to look at Facebook, or it's the last thing we fall asleep looking at night is social media or our phones or technology. And I'm all for technology. I think God can use technology to spread obviously I've used plenty of media here this evening, but it's a point when that's the center. And when it stops becoming used as a tool for God and it starts becoming the center focus of our lives. And so often we got to be very careful with what we allow to be at our center this evening. That's a bad chart, but let's look at this one. The best possible scenario we can have is we start putting God at the center. And there's a quote from Dr. Wendell Evans I heard in college, and I absolutely love the quote, and it was, if we keep God at the center of our lives, the circumference will take care of itself. If you put God at the center of Good News Baptist Church, things are going to take care of itself. If I keep God at the center of Maro, Tanzania, there's not a whole lot I got to worry about because God's at the center focus of it. And God talks about, I will never leave thee nor forsake thee. If God's at the very center of my thought process, if I start thinking about God when I get up in the morning and he's one of the last thoughts I think of when I go to bed at night, chances are everything's going to be okay because I'm keeping God at my center. And that's when God stops being the center is when he stops meaning a lot to you and you start forgetting about him. If you don't put, you talk about if God's not at your center, some ways you can get, I'm not going to wait for a burden to start reading my Bible to get God at the center of my life. If I start reading my Bible, I'm going to start thinking about God more. If I start reading my Bible and spending some time thinking about what I'm being taught at church, if I start filling my life with the things of God, God's going to move his way right there to the center of my life if I start thinking about that. And we talked about if, so many churches, I think your pastor mentioned earlier that you supported several missionaries. And when you start concerning yourselves with, I'm putting money towards these people to lay up rewards for me and share some rewards in heaven for people I've invested in, you're pretty curious to hear from those missionaries, aren't you? It means a lot more when the pastor reads a prayer letter from a missionary that you put money towards to see what God's going to do in his life. And it's that investing and getting involved in the things of God. When you go soul winning and you witness to somebody at a door and you give them a tract and you're really concerned about them and you want to follow up with them the following week and you want to say, hey, remember that person I knocked on last week? And I wonder what they're doing this week. I wonder if I follow up with them. I loved it when your pastor, we visited, like I said, a couple months ago. And I was surprised. I opened my door one day, I heard a knock, and there was your pastor and his wife sitting on our doorstep wanting to follow up with us. And I thought that was really neat. It tells me a lot about how your pastor cares about people. And that's what the ministry is people. And when you start investing your time out soul winning, when you say, I could either sleep in this morning or I could watch whatever's on the news, but I'm going to get up and I'm going to go witness to somebody about Jesus Christ. When you put that as the center, things of God start meaning a lot more to you. And keeping God at the center, you'll have less problems as far as what we think are problems when you start putting God at the center. And my grandfather always talked about he had lawnmowers that would run forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. And I don't know how he got so lucky, but I have a feeling it was because he had God at the center of his life. He wasn't worried about, things of this earth. And one of my grandfather's favorite songs and one of my favorite quotes from him was he always said, to God be the glory, great things he hath done. And we stop realizing this is all just about God this evening. It's not about what we can do or how good my special sounds or how my abilities are. It's all about what can I do to bring glory to God. And that's what I want to strive to bring Maro, Tanzania to be, is it's all about God. We might have a fancy presentation or we might have a lot of ministries our church is involved in, but those are all just tools. Those are just tools that we use to invest in God. And kind of my challenge tonight and my thought I'd like to kind of leave you all with this evening is what's at your center? And if it's not God at your center, you might want to start reevaluating some things and start making some commitments and start getting involved in investing. Earlier the verse said, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. It doesn't say for where your heart is, there will your treasure be. You got to get invested and involved. And the more you get involved, let's say you take a missions trip. The I-9 affecteth thine heart. You take a missions trip outside the U.S. to see how the rest of the world lives, you'll start getting a burden for missionaries. And you may yourself may not get to move to Tanzania, East Africa. I'd love to have some company over there. It'd be fun to visit with you all. But you may not move to Tanzania, East Africa. But you might be able to take a missions trip. You might be able to send your pastor to get a burden for missions by visiting other missionaries and being an encouragement to them. You might be able to support missionaries financially and help take part with them financially in their ministries and laying up rewards in heaven. And if at the very most, a lot of people, what we need right now is prayer. When you partner with someone in prayer, I loved what your pastor said about praying for missionaries before they eat and having that on their mind. If you get one of our prayer cards from the table tonight, please pray for us. We need that a lot. Prayer makes a difference. There'll be a difference between I can go over in Tanzania and work and just have me praying for myself and for God to use me. But I guarantee you there's going to be a difference if I got a bunch of people back in the United States and a bunch of friends, family, and fellow Christians that say, we are investing our time, our prayers, and our efforts into you. We want to see God do something great. Because I'll be praying for you all back here at Good News Baptist Church while we're over in Africa, because I may be a missionary to Tanzania, but y'all are the missionaries to Cedar Rapids, Iowa right here. And I encourage you, just as much as you want your missionary to go out and start spreading the gospel, it's just as important we have representatives back in the United States here saying having a burden for witnessing to people and praying for others. So.